What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you for joining me once again for another episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show a bit of a musical theatre aficionado and hero through these doors, and that is Miss Caroline Sheen. And it's a genuine pleasure to have you on today, Caroline. For anyone who doesn't know, she's a performer who needs no introduction, but she's going to get one anyway. So Caroline has made appearances in film such as Four Kids and It, The Nativity Rocks, and the film version of Les Miserables, directed by Tom Hooper. She's also another member of the GSA family and an honorary member of the University of South Wales. On TV, she has appeared in The Way with the BBC, directed by her cousin, a certain Michael Sheen, Doctors, The Rook, A Silent Witness. And for theatre, I don't think there's been a musical theatre show in existence that Caroline has not been a part of. And those include Mary Poppins, as she played the title role in the US National Tour in 2011, winning the Helen Hayes Award for her performance. She's also appeared in The Funny Thing Happens on the Way to the Forum, the original London cast of Mamma Mia in 1999, which she was the understudy of Sophie. Once in a Lifetime, Grease, and Crazy for You in collaboration with acting musicians at the Watermill Theatre, and of course, Les Miserables, both as Eponine at the Palace and as Fantine at the Queen's, alongside Alfie Boe and Matt Lucas. And if that's not enough, she was also behind one of the most spectacular Subway sandwich commercials you will ever see in existence. And I'm sure you saw that on your television screens at some point over the last few years. So, but without further ado, Caroline, how are you?
Hello. Well, that was lovely. Thank you. My
That's all
whole
right.
life flashed before my eyes.
Oh, but that's just like
Great.
a small sample of your CV. I mean, I could have gone on for another hour or so.
That Subway commercial was great fun. I had someone
Yeah,
come up to me like a couple of years ago and go, "Oh my God, that was you. I love that advert."
it's on YouTube now, guys. Check it out. Honestly, it's spectacular. Great stuff. So we start with the starter question. As Dylan Thomas says, to begin at the beginning, where did it all start for you, Caroline? This love of performing and musical theatre, where did it all come from?
Well, it started in Wales,
Hmm.
not far from where Dylan Thomas was from.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was just something that my family had always been really interested in. They were always part of the local amateur theatre groups wherever they were living. Even my grandparents started doing it when they were younger, and then my parents grew up really enjoying being part of it. And then by the time I came along, they were firmly ensconced in it, like the chairman and the director and all that kind of thing. And yeah, then I became old enough to do small roles in it myself when I was about sort of 12, 13, when they started doing shows that had children in, like Sound of Music and Annie Get Your Gun and things like that. So, and it was just something I always loved watching. They would take me to rehearsals and I would see people that I knew suddenly becoming other people in front of my eyes, without any costumes or lighting or anything, just in the local church hall.
Mm.
I just remember loving seeing people playing pretend and thought it was brilliant. And, it's a real amazing creative outlet for people. And then, they go into the theatre and do the dress rehearsal, and suddenly all these people be in costumes and makeup. And it was just magical, absolutely magical. And I just remember thinking that's something I'd like to do. And then somebody told me that it was something you can do for a profession. I went, oh, wow. I thought jobs were meant to be boring. And something that was like hard work, whereas that looks like really good fun. So yeah, that's what I ended up kind of pursuing, really. I joined local youth theatres. I was a member of the National Youth Theatre of Wales for a few years.
Hmm.
And I became like massively like single-minded about what I wanted to do. And in order to do it, I tried to do as much as possible that I could, like joining all these youth groups. And, I was doing musicals with the Dram Company. I was doing plays with the youth theatre. And I just wanted to get as much experience as possible. So then it would stand me in good stead for going to drama college, and sort of feeling like I knew enough about the business and the world in which I would hopefully end up working in. And that's what I did. I auditioned. I remember I was off school poorly. I can't remember what it was, like laryngitis or something like that. And I used to get the stage. I had the stage every week. My mum and dad paid for me to have the stage, which was really cool. And in the stage, there would be all these adverts for drama colleges. And I remember just sitting there on the phone, because, you know, we didn't have mobile phones really back then. And I rang round all the drama colleges that I thought looked really good in the stage. And I asked them to send me all these prospectuses.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were like, all these big catalogues were coming through the front door for the next few weeks. And my mum and dad were like, what have you done? I was like, well, I sent off these prospectuses to go to drama college, because those are you probably don't even have to have a prospectus now, just a website and all that sort of thing. But back then, that was how you found out all about it. And then I sort of decided to start to apply, and was looking in all these things and making sure I knew what my audition speeches were and everything. And that's it. I applied for 4 different colleges, and I got into a few of them, and decided that Guildford was the one for me. It felt like a real happy medium between being close to London, but also like for a girl from Wales, it wasn't too massive a big town to be in. You know, it's a lovely town, and it feels quite sort of countryside-y as opposed to sort of being in sort of a big metropolis in London. So that's what I did.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Do you remember your audition song that you did?
I do. Yeah. It was Wherever He Ain't from Mac and Mabel.
Oh,
and I forgot my words, but I still got in.
Hey. No, I think that's a good point, because a lot of people kind of freeze in auditions, as you know, as you well know, the first time you apply for drama school, and that audition is so scary. And yet it's, you know, I remember speaking to someone who's been involved in Neil Street Productions, which is Sam Mendes' production company. And they were saying, what, have you ever given someone the part, even though they fluffed their lines in audition? And they go, yeah, that's not, it's not a big commitment, as long as they see that you've got potential, and that's what matters. Similar to what drama does, I suppose.
I think it's that thing of like, there is no, that's what I love about this industry, is that there's no perfection. And I think the more pressure you put on yourself to achieve perfection, the less perfection you are going to achieve, you know. And, you know, making a mistake isn't wrong, it's making a mistake. And it's all about how you recover from it. If you do it on stage, how you work it into your performance, you know. So yeah, there's no kind of one strike and you're out, really, with theatre. It's just keep going and see how it goes, you know.
Exactly. So tell me about GSA. Well, this is like the GSA podcast at the moment. Anyone who's been there. So tell me about your training. What was it like for you personally?
Well, GSA was a place I really wanted to go, because I used to, you know, if we did go up to London, which was a big event when I was a teenager, you know, going up to London and seeing a show was a big deal. And I'd always get a program, and instead of like reading books to go to bed, I would scour through these programs and read up about everything and everybody that was in it. And like to sort of an embarrassing extent, really, because people I now know who are people that I saw in shows when I was a teenager, I'm a bit embarrassed because I pretty much know their whole CV up to like the year 2000, you know what I mean? I feel like a bit of a stalker. But yeah, you know, I'm like, oh yeah, did you do that? Oh yeah, and thinking I knew that because I used to read about you in my program. So yeah, but a lot of the people that, you know, I wanted to emulate are people that went to Guildford School of Acting, and so that was kind of my number one place to go, and I was lucky enough to get in. I remember my audition day so clearly, and like 2 of my dear friends now, who are still in the industry now, are 2 people that I actually auditioned with on the same day. Yeah, Diane Pilkington, who is, you know, smashing it in musical theatre, and Mark Goldthorpe, who is currently on the tour of Sister Act. Wow. So and he sang Starlight Express, Diane sang I Dreamed a Dream, and I sang Wherever He Ain't. And yeah, that, you know, I just remember we all had to sit and, the reason I know this is because it was a big group audition. We all had to sit and watch each other do their auditions. And that was partly intimidating and partly really encouraging, because everybody was super supportive, and that was really lovely. And you had an audience then to perform to, you know. So that was great. I don't think they do it like that anymore. Maybe that's the recall stage now. I'm not even, everything's on Zoom now. I don't know. It's all
Still
changed so much.
self-tapes now, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, bonkers to me. But so it's brilliant because it makes it so accessible as well.
Hugely.
Yeah, so I got into GSA. I was horrendously homesick for the first couple of terms.
Mm.
And I found it really hard work. They're incredibly disciplined there.
Mm.
And, and suddenly, even though I thought I knew a lot about show business and musicals and plays and stuff like that, there's a lot I didn't know. And I was really sort of thrown by, all the kind of technique side of it, like the breathing and the voice and especially the dance stuff, and Laban and all these, like I don't know if they still do it, but we used to do like big term projects on like commedia dell'arte and restoration comedy and like stuff you'd never think you'd need for being, my aim was to be in Les Mis. And I was like, I don't need to do this to be in Les Mis. But actually, it really does come in handy. So it's a real wide ranging education you get there.
Yeah.
And, you're taught by people who really know their stuff.
Mm.
And now I think the guy running the musical theatre course, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is a guy called Stuart Nichols. And he was the year above me at school, at college.
Okay.
At GSA. And I think that's really good. Or I know he's there in some sort of really cool capacity at GSA. And I think he's really good news because I know that he's had the training at GSA that I had, and I know how much he's done in the industry. And you just think, oh, that's really good because he's gonna keep it going the way it should keep going. And I think that's really exciting.
Fantastic. So in terms of like the training and what it gave you and everything, so obviously I had this sort of experience. I didn't know what my process was until I went to drama school. So having been through all the training that you went through, what would you say is your process now when you approach musical theatre roles and indeed other non-musical related stuff?
I think I always try when I'm sort of given an audition piece or a character to play or a show to be in, I always kind of try to work out who I think that person is. And it might be somebody I know, or it might be somebody I've read about, or somebody I admire on the telly, some kind of framework of a personality for me to hang a character on.
Yeah.
And that it can be loads of different people in the same thing. And I sort of go, who does this person remind me of? And I try and use that. And it's not really a technique at all, I don't suppose, but maybe it is. But I always kind of try and have that idea in my head. And, I'll read the play or the script and I will see what other people say. It's the whole Stanislavski thing, isn't it? Where you see what other people say about you and I don't go to the sort of extent of writing them a diary or a journal or anything like that. But it's just good to sort of to make sure you've got as much information on the character as possible, and then make up your own information as well that you think might be useful. And then, like, especially when you're in a run of something, when you're doing 8 shows a week for a year, sometimes you can go, oh, do you know what? I'm not going to do it like that today. I'm going to think of a different person to, like, when I was doing Mary Poppins, I was out in the States and I'd played it for a really long time. I was out in the States, and I remember I was in Pittsburgh and Downton Abbey had started, and my mum had messaged me going, oh, you've got to watch this, you'll really enjoy it. And I was somehow able to download it in America. I think I got it on like iTunes or something like that. And I started watching it and I was like, oh, that's really good. And it was really interesting to me because Julian Fellows, who wrote Downton Abbey, wrote the script for Mary Poppins. And he has such a great wit and such brilliant kind of character observations. And I went into the show one night and I thought, I'm going to play it like Maggie Smith tonight, in Downton Abbey. And obviously I wasn't a carbon copy of the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey, but, just having that idea in my head made me feel fresh and to play the role in just a slightly different way, just gave it a bit more life that night. And sometimes, and and it just, when you're in something that you're doing day in, day out for that long a time, it's nice to change things up a bit. Obviously not to a massive extent that you'd throw other people or anything like that.
Yeah.
But just little thoughts in your head that can just make you feel more alive that night, you know.
Absolutely. Cool. We'll talk a bit about Mary Poppins in just a second, because you know,
Yeah.
just to be the lead in the US tour, that sounds so like it's exciting about that. But just going back to drama school, just very quickly before we move on to that. So if anyone's listening or watching who wants to go to drama school to study specifically for MT, what advice would you give them about what to expect and how to sort of stay disciplined throughout their either 1 year or 3 years that they're there?
Um, I think just value what you've got in front of you when you go there. And I think whenever I do go in, like I came and did a masterclass at Guildford a couple of months back, well, Christmas time, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that.
I was just sort of saying to I think it was third years and second years, I was like, use it, use what you've got in front of you to um to benefit the most out of it, you know, because when you leave drama college, you suddenly go, oh, if I need a studio, I've got to pay for it.
Mm,
Or if I need somebody to play something, I've got to pay for it.
yeah.
And while you're already paying for it anyway, because you're there, use it and abuse it to any extent that you like, but just try and get the most out of it while you're there. And you know, it costs a lot of money to go to these places. And I just think make sure you get your money's worth out of it.
Mm.
And that's sort of your responsibility to do that, really. Because I think, you know, quite a lot of people go to university, and university is a slightly different world. And I just remember when I went to GSA, I was, you know, at college from 9 in the morning till 6 at night. And friends of mine who went to university weren't doing that many hours in a week, you know, of lectures and things like that. They were having a great time, having a real party time. And absolutely, you can have fun at college, but make sure that if you're going to be there, there are so many other people that want that place. So really value it as much as you can, and make the most of it.
Yeah, great stuff. So no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's a really good identification of you know, if you want the training and all that, you know, make sure drama school is the right place for you. Whereas I did the whole university thing, it was a lot
Yeah.
more theory than I thought it would be, and you know, it was had a bit of a love-hate relationship with the whole thing. It gave me some good stuff, but I think if you really want to train, then drama school is the way forward. I completely agree with you.
I
Great
think
stuff.
vocationally, definitely. I think,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to go into the arts in any capacity, then university is a brilliant place to go. But I think if you want to specifically be a performer, I think it's really useful to have the practical side of it as
Yeah.
much as possible, really.
Massively, massively. So yeah, let's going back to Mary Poppins. I remember reading about that, and just you know, you were the lead. You were Mary Poppins across the whole of the US. So how did you get the job? What was it like? Tell me everything.
Well, I had done it here. I'd played it on the first time it went on tour ever was in the UK, and the whole production had to be massively redesigned and reimagined because
Mhm.
it had only been on the West End and in the West End and on Broadway. And so they had to be able to build a set that could travel
Mhm.
and could go to different theaters. Um, and they did. And now the last version that was in London is the touring version of the show. The house that looks like a doll's house and turns around and opens up. And that wasn't how it was originally. The whole stage became an enormous house in the original West End production. And in a way, it kind of made the Banks family look super rich because they were in a house the size of the Prince Edward Theatre, you know. Um, Whereas on tour, the fact that then Mr. Banks's job is at threat, um, and they might lose their income is actually a real threat then, because you can see they're in like a really sweet little house rather than this huge mansion. So I think it added a real good side to the story. Anyway, sorry, I'm blabbering, but yeah. So I did the tour here in Plymouth and Birmingham and Edinburgh,
Mhm.
and then about a year and a half later, they had started the tour in America, and I think they toured for a year, and then they asked me to go and join it. They had the Broadway Mary and Bert on the tour, and then I think they liked the idea of having a British Mary. So they asked me to go out, and I played 16 different states over that whole year. So it's a real eye opener, and going to so many different places in America, and it was an incredible experience. I ended up in the summer in Washington DC for 8 weeks, which was amazing, and hotter than the sun. I swear to God, hotter than the sun there. Yeah. But our first night in DC, there was all these rumors going around backstage that Michelle Obama was watching, and I was like, oh my God, we're gonna have 8 weeks of this. People being like, oh my God, the president's in or whatever. But she actually was watching. Right. and suddenly you're sort of on the side of the stage meeting the first lady of the USA, which was, mind blowing. And I got to see Niagara Falls and do like really cool things. So it was almost like being Mary Poppins was sort of on the side, and I was actually just having a year traveling really. And just pretending to be a magic nanny at night. Yes. But yeah, it was amazing. It was a good thing, and I made lots of lovely friends out there, so it was great.
The perks of the job, traveling and being Mary Poppins.
Yeah, and getting paid to do it.
Getting paid to do it as well. So in terms of like Mary Poppins, like, because it's such an iconic character in a way, and there's the film with Judy Andrews and all that kind of thing, so when you approached the role, so first of all, it's kind of two questions in one really. So who is Mary Poppins to you, and how did you create your own version of such an iconic character?
It was quite easy really, because the show is very different to the film. So you never feel like you're saying somebody else's lines that you've heard. And I could quote you pretty much the whole film of Mary Poppins, because it's been such an integral part of my life, and I've always, and even now, if it was on, I would put it on and watch it, because I still love it, even though it's been something I've done and been so close to. I can still sit and watch it and adore every second of it. And I think Julie Andrews is exquisite in that role. And I would never try to sort of emulate her, because you have to make the part your own. And that's what's quite easy about the show, is that if there is a song from Mary Poppins, the film, it's in a different situation in the theatre piece. A spoonful of sugar isn't in the nursery, it's in the kitchen, and it has a totally different reason for being there than it does in the film. And Feed the Birds even is in a different place, even though you'd think it was in the same place. It's in a different time in the show. So it never felt like I was kind of being the film Mary Poppins. And I read the books as well. I read the P.L. Travers books, and she's so prickly in the books. That's why doing the Maggie Smith thing was sometimes really worked, because she's a tricky character. And I like how mischievous she is. I like how vain she is, and there are so many different facets to her that you can pick a different one for pretty much any scene really, and do that. But yeah, I think that's what made it. And I remember one of the directors, I think it was the director in America, a guy called Anthony Lynn. He said to me, that first, it might have been the guy in the UK, it might have been James Powell, but that first scene when Mary first comes on, it's like the audience are waiting to know if they will accept you as Mary Poppins, especially in America. I think it was the American guy, because it's such a Disney thing in the States. Mary Poppins like belongs to Disney out there. And so that first scene, they're like, oh, you're different. You're not the lady we expect in the movie, but you're sort of a bit like her, but you're new. And you can tell by the end of that first scene, when she then goes up to the nursery with the children, once you start doing the magic, the audience relax, and suddenly you're there, Mary Poppins. Do you know what I mean? That's there. You are now owned by that audience, and that was a really good thing to know, is that just that introductory scene, once you've got all those beats and shown the audience who your Mary is, then you can fly with it. And that was really useful. It was really good.
Fantastic. So, you know, I've got this weird image of like, you know, because obviously you must have flown in the production, right?
Yeah.
How was
Oh,
that?
yeah.
What was it like flying 8 times a week?
It was fine because it was dark. So you don't see how high up you are, really. The things I didn't used to like were when you'd have to do, especially in America, because every venue you went to, you had to do a dry run of the flight. Because it was different. Obviously, in every different theatre, it's in a different place, and you're flying to a different place, and you have to know the journey from where you're flying to back to the stage for your bows and all that. And all the lights would be up, all the house lights would be up, and suddenly you're like flying over your cast members who are like, 20 feet below you, just going, oh my God, I'm really high. But when it's sort of dark and there's just little twinkling lights all around you, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I'm happy to do it as long as I can't see how high I am.
Yeah, I can imagine you sitting down in the auditions going, okay, so Caroline, you don't have a fear of heights, do you? And
yeah, no, and I mean, I don't have a fear of heights. And I remember the first time Mary Poppins opened was in Bristol. They sort of tried it out in Bristol before the West End, and I went to see it there. And I remember Laura Michelle Kelly, and I fell so much in love with the show that night. And Laura flew right over my head. I was in the dress circle. She flew right over my head and out the back of the theatre somewhere. And I was gobsmacked. And I just know that when I was doing it, I wanted the audience to feel just as gobsmacked as I was, just absolutely thrilled to be seeing Mary Poppins flying. And I mean, I know that she was held up by wires. Everyone in the audience who is over the age of 10, maybe 8 even, knows that she's held up by wires. But the magic of it just was incredible. Even to just see it was just brilliant.
Amazing.
So that's, how I wanted everyone to feel. And I hope they did. Maybe they did.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. I mean, you won an award for it. So
I did. In Washington, D.C., they have their own sort of their own theatre awards. And one of the awards is for like visiting productions. And I won it's not even best, it's outstanding. Leading performance by a female from a visiting production. So that was very cool.
You must bow to me now.
It's really cool because also it looks like a Tony. You can spin it round. You can do little spinny things with it. So that's very cool.
Very nice. So let's move on to another show you were part of. You were in the original London cast of Mamma Mia back in 1999. And I think because of course I mentioned the YouTube thing you did with Matt Harrop, who's an also fellow GSA guide. I was on YouTube, guys. Check it out. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you do with him. You talked about being backstage for the first night, or you said all of you were like incredibly nervous because you weren't sure if this was going to work or how it was going to be received. But then it's now still a prominent show in London all these years later. I mean, what was the experience of being a part of the very first company?
It was very cool. It was very cool, and very cool because it was such a surprise. I think nobody had ever really done a jukebox musical before. You tell people you're doing a musical based on the songs of ABBA, and they're like, oh, is it the story of ABBA? And that's what everybody thought it was going to be. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not the story of ABBA. There's a story to it, but it's a different story. And you could see people's eyes sort of going, oh, all right, okay, not sure if I get it. And we were in rehearsals thinking, is this good? We had no idea. And then we started previews, and I don't know whether it's changed now, but in the program, they just put the songs in not in any order. I think they were in alphabetical order in the program. So the audience didn't know which song was coming next. And obviously now it's such a big part of popular culture now that people know what songs are in it and they know when they come. And They know that Chiquitita is going to be funny. But, you know, right at the start, Jenny Galloway would, you know, stand there looking at Siobhan, who was playing Donna, and she would hold the audience in the palm of her hand for ages and then go, Chiquitita, tell me what's wrong. And the audience would fall about. And suddenly we realized that's the hook. You don't, that the audience don't know which smash hit is coming next, you know. And it was really exciting to be a part of that and to sort of see the audience discover this, you know, along with us, really, because we didn't know either. And yeah, it was just really fascinating. To begin with, I think they didn't quite get it. And then there was one really early preview when the director, Phillida Lloyd, said, okay, now we need to let the audience know that they can laugh at it, rather than you know, that they're sort of going, oh, I'm not sure if this is meant to be funny or not, but still laughing. So we had to sort of welcome the laughter and almost like play it with our you know, slightly tongue in cheek. And that's when it really started working. When we let them in on the secret that this was going to be a laugh, that's when it really landed. And I have such respect for Phillida for that, for just really listening to her audience and knowing what they needed to feel comfortable and to have a really good night. It was a real learning curve. And I understudied the role of Sophie, and I got on loads, which was really nice, because there was this new equity rule that people then, up until then, people didn't have to take their holiday. You could save up your holiday, and then at the end of your contract, you would get a big holiday payout. So the weeks that you hadn't taken, you would then get like 3 or 4 weeks pay at the end of your contract. So quite a lot of people would do that and save up the money, so they had a bit of money at the end of the job. Whereas when we did Mamma Mia, a new rule came in, so we had to take holiday. So all the understudies were like, yeah, we're gonna get at least 4 weeks guaranteed as our covers. So that was really good. And in a new show like Mamma Mia, you get in really exciting people watching you. You know, one time I performed and Tom Hanks came round and said, well done. You know, that was pretty cool.
That was very cool.
Yeah, so it was, you know, a really big year, and a really surprising year, because we just had, like I said, we had no idea. And I'm really, really, when I got offered it, I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, because I played 2 principal roles in the West End. Before that, I'd been in Into the Woods at the Donmar playing one of the Ugly Sisters, and I'd been in Greece playing one of the Pink Ladies, playing Marty, and understudying Rizzo and Sandy. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in the ensemble. I sort of felt, I was a bit snooty about it. It felt like it was a bit of a step down. But I really wanted to be part of an original cast. That was a real big bucket list thing for me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And a friend of mine, I'd been in Into the Woods, Matt Rawle was in that with me, and he had been part of the workshops, and he went, it's a really good part. He said, I've got the script, if you want to borrow it, it's a really good part that you're understudying, so I definitely think you should do it. And I'm really glad he said that to me, because I did it and had the most incredible year. So yeah, sometimes you just have to get advice from people about what to do and listen to them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Sophie, when you did play her, I suppose the big question a lot of audiences who go to Mamma Mia ask, of course you never find out, but to you, who is Sophie's dad?
I know who Sophie's dad is. It's not a question. There's no doubt. There's no doubt, because in that first script, it says who it is. I can't possibly tell you who it is.
Of course you can.
But there is in the original script, it's Bill.
Oh, okay.
Who is the Stellan Skarsgård character in the movie, Nick Kolikos. But that there was a really big thing of, at one point, Phillida kind of realized it doesn't matter who the dad is. And it shouldn't matter who the dad is.
Yeah.
That's not what the story's about. So, like, again, you know, she was so good at really crafting the show to make it what it is. Because the thing is, if you do find out who the dad is, you've got two other dads who are going to be a bit disappointed,
Yeah.
you know. So I think the fact that you don't find out is really lovely. And so, you know, I don't that, you know, one of the versions of it, Bill was the dad, but
Okay.
he's not the dad anymore. They all are. So who knows?
There was that line in I know it's in the film. I haven't seen it on stage yet, but you know the line towards the end where Colin Firth's character in the film says, "I think it's just great just to even have a third of
Yeah,
so."
that's in the show too.
Was
Yeah.
that there from the beginning?
It was there once they decided to take, because the writer Catherine Johnson,
Yeah.
she was with us the whole rehearsal process, so she would
Mm.
rewrite things and change things on a daily basis, and that was one of the things that she changed. Yeah, I really remember that.
Mm.
Actually, I've never told that story before, because I've talked about Mamma Mia quite a lot in interviews and stuff like that, and that's it. It's a fresh story just for you, Oliver.
Yes.
But yeah,
Appreciate it.
I just really appreciated the fact that she went, we don't need to know who the dad is. It's about Sophie discovering that she doesn't need to get married. She needs to go and live her life, and then, you know, the mum deciding that, you know, she wants to settle down with Sam, and
Mm.
that's the happy ending. The happy ending isn't Sophie finding her dad.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's really cool.
Yes, very cool. Did they not offer you a part in the film?
No,
No.
what's that about? I have heard there's a rumor about a third one. I was like, oh,
No,
that's why
really?
ABBA wrote a new album. They need
Yeah.
material for the threequel. Um, but
Yeah.
no, there are a few people that have been in the movie, but no, it's never come my way. What's that about?
You're in the original cast, for God's sake.
We should all be in it. And
Yeah.
also, next year is the 25th birthday of Mamma Mia. We should all be there too. That's where we need to be. There needs to be
I'm
a big
sure.
party.
I'm sure you do like a Billy Elliot thing where all the Sophies just come on and sing "I Have a Dream" or something towards the end.
I think on the 20th, they got all the Dynamos back. And
Okay.
that was quite poignant because one of our Dynamos, we had Siobhan McCarthy as Donna, Jenny Galloway as Rosie, and Tanya was a wonderful woman called Louise Plowright. And she passed away very suddenly of pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And so they were the final dynamos to walk down. And obviously it was just not Louise, it was Siobhan and Jenny without Louise. And that was on the footage that I've seen of it.
Wow.
That was really sad to see the two of them without her, you know.
Yeah.
Because then Louise went on to play Donna for 3 or 4 years after that. So she was a really big part of Mamma Mia. But I think they gave her a big shout out and, you know, raised a glass to absent friends and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe the 25th they might get us all back. That would be really cool because we're all really tight. We've got a big old WhatsApp group on my phone where we were messaging about Eurovision last week. So it's always going on the Mamma Mia group.
Fantastic. So cool. That's amazing. So let's talk about something else you've also been a part of a lot, which of course is Les Miserables. You know, you were part of that at the Palace Theatre where you played Eponine, and of course you were at the Queen's Theatre where you played Fantine, where I actually saw you as Fantine alongside Alfie Boe and Matt Lucas and everything. So, but we'll start with Eponine. Similar sort of question to before. So, for such an iconic role, because it was at the Palace before it started at the Barbican, then it went to the Palace, and then it went to the Queen's, and now I think it's at the Sondheim Theatre at the moment.
Yes, which is what the Queen's used to be. So it was the Queen's, and then the Queen's became renamed as the Sondheim a few years back. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So tell me about, first of all, Eponine. What was the experience of being at the Palace and doing Eponine?
Oh, it was massive. That was like probably one of the biggest deals of my career because that character was the reason I loved musicals so much because I wanted to be her. So that was a really big deal for me. And I'd auditioned for it a few times and never got it. And there was one time I remember auditioning and they told me, no, you're not an Eponine, you're too sophisticated. And I was devastated. And I was like, I shouldn't have worn this dress. Do you know what I mean? To my audition. And actually it did mean that the next time I went for Eponine, I didn't dress as smart and I got it. So that was quite cool.
Yeah.
So everything is useful. Always listen to people and always use what information you've got to make good decisions and good choices. So yeah, I was doing The Witches of Eastwick, and we'd got our closing notice, like literally 2 weeks. You're closing in 2 weeks. It was after 9/11, and you're closing, and it was the same company. It was Cameron McIntosh, and that night we had sort of commiseration drinks in the bar at the Prince of Wales. And I was talking to the casting director, and I was like, when's Les Mis auditioning? When's that coming up next? And he said, why? Do you want to be Cosette? And I said, I can't sing Cosette. I want to be Eponine. And he was like, oh, and he was really, really surprised that that was something I wanted to do. And I was like, obviously, that's the part everybody wants, isn't it? Because that's the part I always wanted. And he went, oh, okay. And he said, I'll talk to your agent. And they called me in sort of a few days later, and I went in and I think I did two, maybe I did two auditions, or maybe it was sort of, I was at recall stage anyway. Oh yeah, I went in, and then they got me back in to sing with the Marius and the Cosette, who were both already in the show. And yeah, I got the job. You'd think I'd remember where I was when I got it, because it was such a big deal, but I can't actually remember. But I probably cried, because I cry when I get most jobs. Yeah, and that was that. So I was in it for about 10 months, I think we did it for that. They were weird contracts, like timing wise. So yeah, I ended up playing Eponine, and I did love it. I really loved playing that part, but because it was something I wanted to do so badly, I had quite a tough time on it. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and sort of unknowingly, really, like how I said I wanted people in the audience to feel like I felt when I saw Mary Poppins fly. I sort of wanted everyone in the audience to feel like I felt when I watched Eponine, and that's never going to happen, because not everyone is me. But that was in my head all the time, and I was just like, this is too much pressure. So I didn't stay on. I probably, but my 15-year-old self would have been like, what, you need to play this role forever and ever. But I kind of felt like I've done it now. I even wrote, I mean, this is shocking now, but I wrote to Jim Will Fix It to ask to play Eponine once when I was about 14, just to do like one show, as if that's ever going to happen. But I'm quite glad. Obviously, I didn't get a response, so that's probably a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that Eponine was a sort of double-edged sword, really. I loved playing it, and it was such an achievement and such a massive thing for me to do in my own head. But because of that, it made me like super stressed all the time.
Yeah, and of course, did you have a similar experience with Fantine, even though you did that a few years?
Yeah, it was about 9 or 10 years later, and I was really aware of the experience I'd had the first time around, and I thought, oh God, I hope. But I think because that was never a part that I'd kind of wanted to play so badly, I actually had an absolute blast playing Fantine.
Right.
And like I said, if you told my teenage self that, you'd be like, what? But I much preferred it. And it's a much more sociable role, because you spend a lot of time in the ensemble as well. And it was I loved doing it at the Queen's. I thought it was a really great theatre, or the Sondheim, really great theatre for that show. And it was a really special time for the show. The film was happening. Alfie was coming in to play it, and Matt Lucas was in it. And it really felt like, I can't remember how many years it had run by then, but I think it was a good sort of 27, 28 years.
About
so
26th year, I think it was.
Yeah, so it was a real sort of refreshing of the show, and they put new lighting states in, they put a new sound system in, they put new orchestrations in. They got a couple of stars in the show, both of whom were like so excited to be there. I mean, Matt Lucas was like a sort of puppy. He loved it. It was so wonderful to see, somebody who was so famous, or so is so famous, being so humbled by the show. I feel like he was really living his dream in it as well, and that was a really lovely thing to see.
Yeah.
Um, and it just felt like they're both real team players, and it was a really lovely company of people.
Yeah. Amazing.
Um, so I had a much better time, much better
Yeah.
time that time around.
That's great. No, I was just curious because about yeah, because the nature of both parts, Eponine and Fantine, there's a big emotional demand of both characters. If anyone
Mm,
who hasn't seen the show, Eponine's like watching the man she falls in love with go off with another girl.
mm.
Fantine is literally got no money. She's down on her luck. And look, I think Anne Hathaway, who played her in the film, said she's literally where you meet her in the musical. She's literally at the bottom of a hole, looking up, thinking, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to get out of this."
Yeah,
Yeah. And you contrast those two with Mary Poppins because Mary Poppins is such a enthusiastic, really happy role, really joyous role to play every night.
yeah.
But with those two, I know you said you had a blast with Fantine, but when you get to the end of the show and you feel like, oh, that was okay, I did a lot tonight, or I did a lot, particularly on like a double show day, like you've done a lot
Yeah.
during the evening. And so how did you, well, first of all, did you have those experiences of like, oh God, that was tough? And how did you?
Well, the thing is, it ends in such a rousing way, Les
Yeah.
Mis, that you never come away feeling down. You come away feeling like you've been through the ringer, but in a really exhilarated way, because the ending is so
Yeah.
it's a real positive end, because it's Jean Valjean's story. Everybody else is sort of a tool in it, but it's his story, and it's a story of faith and hope, really. And like you
Mm.
said, Fantine is a character who feels like she has no hope, but that's what we're always taught. The people who put Les Mis on always say, don't ever feel sorry for yourself in this show, or the audience needs to see that you have to keep going, and you will keep going. And that's a bit like I Dreamed a Dream and On My Own. The ending of it has to be a positive one. That's why I don't know how it's directed now in the new version, but at the end of I Dreamed a Dream, even though she's saying life has killed the dream I dreamed, she walks off, but she turns around and looks back out, and back out at the dream that she was thinking of. So that's still like a positive thing. Um, that one day maybe she could get back to that dream. And like, even in On My Own, she's like, I love him, but only on my own. But at the end of that, she makes the decision to go and be with him on the barricades. And that's a positive thing as well. And they said the minute you start feeling sorry for your character, the audience won't feel sorry for you.
Mm.
That it's the audience's job to feel sorry for you rather than the character's job to feel sorry for themselves.
Mm.
So, that, and I think with regards to, like you saying, going through the ringer in the show, it's just a really positive message of how somebody can find love, even though, if you'd seen him at the beginning in the prison camp, you'd think he would never find any kind of joy in his life whatsoever. And the journey that he's been on through his faith and through his actions to get to this beautiful moment where he's got his adopted daughter on her wedding day, and his new son, son-in-law who he has met and trusts and thinks is wonderful and saved from the barricades. He's surrounded by that love. And I think that's what gets people.
Mm.
And it is emotional, and people are, and you can hear people just like the whole audience is sniffing away and blowing their noses, but in a really beautiful way.
Yeah.
You've taken them on a really amazing journey. I hate saying journey, but that's what it
No,
is.
it's true. Yeah.
You're sort of traversing this landscape of highs and lows, and you come away being like, wow, that
Mm.
was it. It just is reaffirming, So it actually, you feel just as good when
Mm.
you finish Les Mis. You feel just as good as you do finishing Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
It's a really positive
Yeah.
thing.
I feel
Yeah,
like it's about all the characters find faith in something, or they have something.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're bang on there. It is really good. Yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen it for ages. I might have to go and see it again.
No, you and me both. It's been a while. It's been a while. So cool. So it's been great to hear about all these things that you've done, but
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear about like the technical side of it, or like the personal like commitments that you as a performer have for such these big roles, you know, in
Yeah.
big events. I suppose one of them, one question I've got here is like, do you have like a pre-show ritual that you have for every performance that you do?
I feel like I really should have, but I don't. Only in that, because I think that sometimes people really do need that, but I I sort of, if I do have one, it's very immediate. It's like literally just before I go on stage, and I'm just like, take a deep breath, go on, and just, it's a little bit like starting a roller coaster. You're sort of sitting in the ride, your thing's coming down, and you're being taken up the top, ready to sort of go right over the top of the roller coaster, and you just take this deep breath, and over you go, and you just let it happen. I think that's my ritual, really, because every sort of half hour call you get people coming into your room with like microphones and wigs and costumes and admin stuff and
Mm.
all that sort of thing. So I would find it really hard if I needed a ritual then to be able to have one. And I'm FaceTiming home to saying good night to the family and stuff like that. So it's literally, I'll be on the side of the stage ready to go on, deep breath, let's go, let's do it. That's basically
No, that's great.
that's as much as it is, I'm afraid.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, it's a good one to have. You know, just take a deep breath and just go for it, and whatever happens will happen. And in terms of like managing expectations, because people in the audience in the West End, particularly nowadays,
Mm,
they're paying a lot of money to be there, and
huge. Yeah.
huge amount. I mean, if you want a ticket for Les Mis now, it's like £200 each or something. It's crazy. And so when you, and particularly like let's say Fantine, for example, like you go out there and you sing I Dreamed a Dream, and it's a song that a lot of people know,
Yep.
in the audience. uh how did you sort of the question I've got here is like, I'm sure you like, how do you manage like the expectations of the audience? Because when you sing that first note or that first
Yeah.
line,
You can
everyone in the
literally hear it.
audience.
Like when I was in it, I mean, that I was in it a long time ago now. I mean,
Yeah.
like 12 years ago. But when I was in it, it wasn't that long after Susan Boyle had won Britain's Got
Cool.
Talent. It was maybe three
Yeah,
or
yeah.
4 years after. And as soon as the overture, the introduction of I Dreamed a Dream started, you could literally hear the audience going, oh, Susan Boyle, Susan Boyle, Susan Boyle. And not necessarily Susan Boyle, but you could hear sort of people sort of settling down in their seats, going, oh, "This is I like this song," because it's the first famous song in
Yeah.
Les Mis. Out of the 5 big ballads, it's the first one, and so they're like, "Oh, I know this one. Let's listen."
Mm.
And it's really terrifying, but I used to find it when I've been incredibly lucky in my career, to play parts and sing songs that are really popular. Like when I was in Greece, because I went into Greece twice. The second time I played Sandy, and that time, I'm going on stage singing "Hopelessly Devoted to You," thinking everybody in the audience knows this, and people used to sing along. I know we've had this big drama of, don't sing along in the theatre, but
Mm.
how can don't disrupt people, don't do that, because like you said, people have paid all that money to see it. But quite a lot of the time on a Saturday night, or when people were a bit drunk, you'd hear the whole audience be going, "But now there's nowhere to hide," and just joining in. And right, but
Yeah.
it's different for different shows. But I would literally be, I remember one night I went on stage and sang "Hopelessly Devoted," and I got to the second verse and I was like, I don't know what the second verse is. So I sang the third verse instead. So then when time I got to the third verse, I just sang it again. And
Right.
I knew the audience was sort of going, that's not right. That's not right. But there was nothing I could do to stop it. And then the same thing happened in Mamma Mia when I was singing "Thank You for the Music." I knew that the song was something about my mum saying I could sing before I could talk.
Um,
She said I
I
began
could
to
sing
sing
before I
long
could talk.
before I could talk. That
Yeah,
line,
yeah.
I knew it was something about singing before talking, and that's all I knew. So I just made it up, and I was like, and I made sure I finished on talk, but it made very little sense whatever came out of my mouth. And the three dads are looking at me going,
Uh,
sorry, with a quizzical expression because you can't see my face on a podcast. Um, but you know, and I knew the audience were like, oh, so I've always had that real stress of like with On My Own, with I Dreamed a Dream, going, oh my God, the audience know these songs.
yes.
Um, Thinking, oh my God, I've got to make sure I sing. So in the wings, before I go on, I will sing the first two words of each verse in my head. So there's a little ritual for you there.
Okay.
So, you know, in Hope Pursuit, it's like, guess mine, my head, my heart, or whatever. I can't remember what they are now, but I would sing those first three verses, the beginnings of those verses, just to make sure that it was fresh in my head when I went on stage the next time.
Amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a good.
stressful. It's not easy.
I'll ask you about your stage stories in just a second, but
Yeah.
I think so. Another question I've got is how do you stay disciplined and dedicated to long runs? Because just doing 8 shows a week is it's a lot on yourself and everybody else.
Yeah.
But you're like, how do you sustain it for like 6 months or a year, or like how do you keep it fresh every night?
You kind of just get into the rhythm of it really, and it's always different because audiences are always different, and that's something you can really thrive off. um and you have different people playing different parts every night. And that's always fun. Like, the last big show I did in London was 9 to 5, and that's quite
Yeah.
every role in that is quite a big role. So most nights it would be a different understudy playing one of the parts because of the holiday situation.
Mhm.
So that was always, keeps you on your toes. And also I I take my job super seriously, and I want to make sure the audience get their money's worth, and I really do. But we do have fun, I can't be too serious backstage, and that's where the fun happens.
Mhm.
And we're giggling and we're having a great time, and that's something I really enjoy. The relationships off stage and the fun you have off stage it feeds into what you do on stage, and it just makes the show even more vibrant. I think if you can tell everyone's up there having a really good time,
Mm.
then it really comes across. So I always, I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously, if you see
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah, great. And so tell me about some of the amusing times you've had like on stage. Obviously, backstage you're relaxed and you're not on stage. But
Yeah.
when things go wrong on stage in front of a paying audience, what's been some
Well,
moments?
I did fall flat on my backside in Mary Poppins,
Oh.
which was quite embarrassing. Like I said, I think mistakes happen and we're only human, and things like that go wrong. But I was in Birmingham doing, we were in Act Two doing Step in Time. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's all the chimney sweeps and Mary basically, and the kids on
Mm.
the rooftops of London doing a massive tap dance number, and it's phenomenal. The work in that number is brilliant. Stephen Mear and Matthew Bourne choreographing it. It's one of the best numbers in any musical ever. And fight me for it, I will win. That's the one. But Mary, all the sweeps are in really dark, sooty costumes. They've got little tiny little jewels all over them. So they do sparkle and glimmer, but they're quite dark costumes, and they're covered in soot. And Bert is in quite a dark costume with a little red waistcoat. And the
Mm.
kids are in, I think, like peachy color, peach and pink costume. I'm in a bright red coat, and a spotlight. And I'm singing the words when the steps aren't going as smoothly as they might.
Uh-oh.
And literally, I say smoothly, and my tap gets caught in some sort of groove in the stage, and my legs go right from under me, and I fall flat on my backside.
Nice.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I've spent the last 2 hours telling this audience I am practically perfect in every way, and here I am flat on my backside on this stage. And so I thought, maybe I should just sit here. Maybe I'll sit here cross-legged and watch the dancing as if it's what Mary's meant to do. But the sweeps weren't quite on my wavelength. They're like, oh, Mary, let me help you up there. Come on, Mary, up you get. And they're all like helping me up, but I'm all like clumsy with like one arm up in the air, one arm being pulled this way by. And they were all brilliant. And they all helped me get up. And it was probably like seconds that I was, down there for. And hopefully nobody saw it. But the big red coat and the big white spotlight might have been highlighting it somewhat. But yeah, no, so that was a funny one. And I just thought, what's the point now? What's the point? I'm clearly not practically perfect. So why go on? But, obviously you have to do it. But yeah, that was slightly mortifying. But no, there's always a lot of fun to be had. I've told this story on numerous interviews. There was when I was Eponine, dying in Marius's arms. My lovely Marius had been off with a cold. And just after I died, a huge blob of his snot landed on my face. I died. It was the quickest I'd died ever because I could literally see it coming out of his nose, and he couldn't do anything because he's holding me, and he couldn't get this because he's crying his eyes out. And all the students are standing around watching, going, "Oh, poor Eponine's dying. Oh my God, what's coming out of Marius's nose?" No. And then I died really fast. It hit me in the face, and he's then hugging me and wiping it off, going, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And the 4 boys had to sort of carry me off, and they're like, their arms are going up and down because they're laughing so much. That's the worst one. I don't think you can get much worse than that, but I don't want to tempt fate.
No. Touch wood now. Yeah, I just got a few more things for you, Caroline, today. So actually, you mentioning there about you've been off with an illness and stuff. But how do you? I think again from like a singing perspective, because your voice, you've got to take care of it. You got shows times a week. So if you are off with an illness or you've been to something like, I know some people go to festivals lose their voices and stuff, but obviously you wouldn't do that if you're in the West End or anything, because that'd be silly. But if you do go off with an illness and your voice isn't 100%, what would you say was the best way of getting it back, and how did you sort of keep it intact when you are doing 8 shows a week?
I mean, I always warm up, always do the vocal warm up that they offer. That's always a good thing to do. If you get ill, you just got to take as much medicine as you can, keep on top of it and drink lots of water. But the big thing for me is always steaming. That's the most recuperative thing I think you can do for your vocal cords, because it's quite often vocal tiredness as well. And I don't, I have got one of those sort of steamers that looks like a sort of a little kettle, but I usually just get my head over a bowl of steaming water as many times a day as possible and hope that fixes it as quickly as possible, because it's you have to let yourself be ill, but it's a case of trying to get back to top fitness as soon as you can, because you lose money if you're not well, you're not paid. I think you get a few days sickness pay now, but that it depends on what level of salary you're on. But I think most principals, if they're off, they don't get paid that day. So it is super stressful. And actually on 9 to 5, I had quite a lot of vocal problems for the first time ever. And I think it was something to do with the sound system in the theatre and it being sort of a big show. And I was singing very low. My character was sort of the low one in the trio. And I was probably pushing a bit too hard in a place where I didn't really have to. So there are sort of experts you could go to, and I went to this woman who taught me all this stuff. I think most colleges teach it now, but with a straw, and you blow and you hum into water through a straw, and that's amazing. That was really eye-opening. You feel like your voice suddenly goes into a totally different place. And it was really, really good. I would advise anyone to try and find, I don't really know even the technical name for it, but look up sort of vocal tube or voice tube exercises, and they are really good. And they really helped my voice from come back from quite a bad place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good thing. And rest. That's what I was when I was on 9 to 5, I would get up. You know, I've got a family, so you got to do all the family stuff in the morning, get people off to school and things like that. But I would then go back to bed, and that was that. You know, I'd get up then about matinee day was hard, obviously, but if it wasn't a matinee day, I would more than likely be back in bed by 10 o'clock and asleep for the next couple of hours just to make sure I was rested. Because, you know, I'm not in for like till like half midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So it's really vital that you rest as much as possible.
Yeah, great stuff. And just going back to labors just for one more question, if I may.
Yes.
And then just got two more, and then when we could sort of finish. There's a bit at the end where Eponine and Fantine come on at the end when Valjean is about to make his way up to the heavens. Why did it, I mean, I understand why Fantine's there, but why do you think Eponine's there as well?
I think Eponine is there to kind of give her blessing to Marius and to Cosette, because obviously she grew up with Cosette as a kid. You know, the little Cosette and little Eponine are the two children in the inn at the beginning with not at the beginning, Act 1 with Master of the House.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a nice kind of finishing note for that, because otherwise you kind of think she died unloved, but she was always loving, and you know, she adored Marius. It was clearly, you know, the love of her life, and it's just her blessing, I think, at the end, and it's their wedding day, and I think she's just also there to, you know, take Valjean away to a better place. But yeah, I do remember asking that, and that was kind of the response I got. It's like, why am I here? You know, I'm nothing to do with Jean Valjean or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was the explanation I got. So that was nice. It was she's there for Marius and looking down on him and being happy for him in his meant to be on the happiest day of his life, but obviously not, because his father-in-law's just died. But yeah, it's her blessing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Caroline, thank you so much for today. This has been amazing to talk to you. I know we're slightly pressed for time. We know you've got to shoot off to do other things today. I just got two more questions for you. Just one.
Fire away.
Yeah, one's the finisher, but we'll do one just before that. Let's say in your career thus far, playing all these amazing roles, Eponine, Fantine, Grease, Mamma Mia, etc. What would you say was a moment you had on stage singing a particularly famous song from one person or a group in the audience? Like, what's been the best reaction you've had from an audience when you're singing one of the most famous songs that really
there's no competition there. When I was doing Poppins in America, we toured around. Obviously, we're in different places every few weeks, and we went to Atlanta. And Atlanta is a huge theater. It's called the Fox Theater in Atlanta, and I think it seats something like 4,500. It was a lot of people, and so much so that they would pretty much cut the whole balcony off because it was so massive that there was no point selling it. But I think we used to have like 3,500 people in every night. And the first night, me and Gavin Lee, we came on to take our bows. And it was like we were John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It was literally like we were Beatles. And the audience went absolutely nuts. And I was just like, oh my God. We were, it was, you know, I was Beyonce for the night, you know, it was incredible. And it was with so much force that you could almost feel it. It felt like your hair was sort of going back on your face when you bowed, because they were going so bananas. That was when we were there for like I think we did 3 or 4 weeks there, and it was amazing. And then when we went on to the next place, I was like, oh, this is boring now. This is not Atlanta anymore.
Yeah, the
There's a
guys
few,
last week was so much more better than you.
yeah, Atlanta ended up being my favorite place on tour, but not for that reason. There are loads of other reasons because it was such a great city. But yeah, that was really special. There was also a time when we were in Pittsburgh, which I spoke about earlier, and they were in this, I want to say semi-finals. It's probably not called that, but something really big with the Super Bowl. Whereas if they'd won, they would have been in the Super Bowl, right? And the guy that was helping, one of the guys that was helping out backstage, there's always locals that help out backstage. You know, he was with us, but he was from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And he said, you need to take this on stage with you. And he gave me this yellow and black, like, you know, the beer mats you get when you're at a bar. So it's like a rectangular one, not one that you sort of put your beer on, but like a long one that's sort of like a towel, like a rectangular towel. He gave me this and he went, this is a terrible towel. And it is one of the symbols of the Steelers, which is the name of the American football team. And he said, if you can work this into your bow, the audience are going to go bananas. And I was like, because they were playing that day or that night or that afternoon. And I was like, oh, okay. So, but it's quite a quick change because I fly off and then you have to run back down to the side of the stage, change your coat, and then go on for your bows. And I was like, okay, well, I'll hook it. I'll sort of tuck it into my skirt and see what happens. And so I ran off, changed, put my coat on, tucked it into my skirt, went on, bowed. Then we do quite a big sort of dance and a bit of super cow. And then we bow and we bow. And as the audience are sort of still clapping, the scrim comes in front of us. And as the scrim came in, I reached back and got the thing out of my skirt. And you're meant to like do that around your head with it, sort of like a lasso. And as I did that, they just went screamed their heads off. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. They were thrilled that Mary Poppins was a Steelers fan. But I got into a massive amount of trouble for it. Disney were like, Mary Poppins doesn't, a bit like the Queen, she's not allowed to show support for any one particular team. So I wasn't allowed to do it in the evening. I was gutted.
Oh, mate.
By the evening, I think they'd lost, so it's probably best that I didn't.
Oh,
but,
right.
That was a pretty cool thing to do.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing to do with my performance, just to do with the fact that I was waving a terrible towel.
I'm sure that had an impact as well. Sure. It's all good. Wow. And just finally today, I think you might have answered this question already, but what's been an experience you've had in your career or experiences you've had in your career to date that you're never, ever, ever going to forget?
Oh, I think opening nights are always pretty special. And then the opening night for the Witches of Eastwick was at Somerset House, which is on the Thames, on the banks of the Thames. And it was a massive deal for me because it was an original cast and I had a role in it and I had a beautiful duet to sing. And it's this party with Cameron Mackintosh is known for throwing the most incredible opening night parties. And for some reason, our show had to be at like 6 o'clock and we didn't really know why. And by the time we got to the party, we'd been told why, because he'd paid for fireworks to happen over the Thames, like in celebration of Witches of Eastwick. And they played my duet. They played me and Peter Yobak, who I was playing opposite. They played our duet as the fireworks were like going off. And it was just amazing to sort of see fireworks accompanied by this song that I just sung in an opening night of a Cameron Mackintosh premiere. That is the, you know, if I ever write an autobiography, that's going in, you know. that was really special, really overwhelming. Yeah, that was cool.
Wow, I'm just getting goosebumps even hearing your voice over fireworks on the Thames. I mean,
it was really, really special.
Wow, that's very special. And on that note, I think that's a brilliant place to draw this to a close. So, Caroline, thank you so much for today. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to see what more you do in the future. You know,
Who knows? Who knows what's coming next?
of course, there will be
I
a next time.
don't.
There will be a next time, and there'll be a time after that. But yeah, I'm so excited to see what work you do in the future, and I'm sure I'll be there in the audience cheering you on. Yeah, and of course your husband, Mike Gibson, as well, who's also been on the show. You know, you guys are just going to keep tearing it up and do some incredible things. So yeah, this has been fantastic. If you just hang on, I'll finish the recording. I'll say goodbye to you one to one. But guys, wow, what an episode, guys!
Thank you.
No, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very soon. And once more, Caroline Sheen, thank you.